The war was finally over, after 18 long cycles of blood and fire. The Kavani Empire had won, the last Rionar hive ship burned in the darkness of space. Above the planet, Talos 7 billions of innocent lives had been saved. The enemy swarm that had eaten 4 civilizations before them was now nothing but scattered wreckage floating in the void. On the observation deck of the flagship Eternal Flame, the celebration had begun. Kavani warriors drank victory wine and sang ancient songs of triumph. Their scaled bodies pressed together in the crowded space, green and silver and gold scales catching the light of distant stars. They laughed and shouted and embraced one another. Many of them had believed they would never see this day, but Commander Veston did not celebrate. He stood alone at the far end of the observation deck, his 4 eyes fixed on the stars beyond the thick glass, his hands covered in dark green scales that showed his age pressed flat against the cold viewport behind him. His warriors made merry. They called his name sometimes, raising their cups in his honor. He did not turn around. Vexarin was old. He had fought in wars before this one. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched good soldiers die and bad soldiers survive. War had no fairness in it, and he had made peace with that truth long ago. But this war had been different. This war had changed everything he thought he knew about the galaxy and the creatures in it. The door behind him opened and he heard familiar footsteps approaching. He did not need to turn around to know who it was. Lieutenant Kira Sol had been his second command for 3 cycles now. She was young and eager and full of hope. Her scales were bright silver, unmarked by the scars that covered his own body. She stopped beside him and held out a cup of victory wine. Purple liquid glowed faintly in the starlight. Commander, she said softly, you should join the others. This is your victory more than anyone else's. High Council has already sent word of your commendation. They are calling you the greatest war hero our people have seen in 1,000 cycles. Vexarin took the cup but did not drink from it. He turned it slowly in his hands, watching the light play across the surface of the wine. War hero, he repeated. The words tasted bitter in his mouth. They give me medals and titles. They will write songs about my name. Children will learn about Commander Vex Thurin in their history lessons, as they should. Kurasal said proudly, you led us to victory. You saved the Empire. He finally turned to look at her. His 4 eyes were tired and old, and something strange lived in them now. Kurasal had served beside him through the worst battles of the war. She had seen him face death without flinching. She had watched him make impossible decisions that saved thousands of lives. She had never seen him look the way he looked right now. If she did not know better, she would have said that Commander Vex Thurin was afraid. I did not save the Empire, he said quietly. I was simply there when it was saved. There is a difference, Lieutenant, a very important difference. Kurasal tilted her head in confusion. I do not understand, Commander. You planned the final assault. You commanded the fleet that broke the Draken defensive line. Every tactical decision came from you. Vexarin let out a low laugh. It was not a happy sound. It was the laugh of someone who had learned something they wished they could forget. Let me ask you something, Kurasal. Do you remember when the human transport arrived? Do you remember how angry the High Council was? She nodded slowly. Of Course she remembered, it had been one of the strangest moments of the entire war. The coalition had called for reinforcements from every allied world. Theathai had sent 12 battle cruisers. The Kryn had sent their psychic warriors. Even the small Morani colonies had contributed what ships they could spare, and then the humans had arrived. Earth was a young world. Humans had only discovered faster than light travel. Within the last 100 cycles, they were new to the galactic community, and no one knew much about them. They were soft creatures with no natural armor. They had no claws, no fangs, no venom. They needed to breathe a specific mixture of gases and could only survive in a narrow range of temperatures. By all standards of galactic biology, they were weak and fragile things. The High Council had accepted Earth into the coalition mainly as a gesture of goodwill. No one expected the humans to contribute anything meaningful to the war effort. When their transport finally arrived, the Coney delegation had been shocked and insulted to discover that Earth had sent only 37 soldiers, 37 against a swarm that numbered in the billions. The High Council had nearly declared it a diplomatic incident. Messages were sent demanding an explanation. How dare the humans insult the coalition with such a pathetic offering? Did they not understand that the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance? Curacao remembered all of this. She also remembered what happened next, though she still did not fully understand it. The humans were effective, she said carefully, more effective than anyone expected. But surely you do not believe that 37 soldiers won this war? Vexarin set his untouched wine on the ledge beside the viewport. He turned to face the celebration behind them. His warriors were still singing, still drinking, still believing that their strength and courage had saved them all. I need to speak to the senior officers, he said. All of them tonight, Commander. What about? He started walking toward the door, and Curacao hurried to keep up with him. The celebrating warriors parted before him, reaching out to touch his shoulders and offer their thanks. He acknowledged them with brief nods, but did not stop moving. They need to know the truth, Beekson said without looking back. About we really won this war. About what I saw the humans do. About what those 37 soldiers taught me. He paused at the door and finally turned to meet her eyes. They need to understand what we have invited into our galaxy. Per us all, they need to understand what humans really are, because if we do not learn this lesson now, while the humans still consider us friends, we may not survive long enough to learn it later. The door slid open, and Commander Vex then walked out into the corridor, leaving the sounds of celebration behind him. Curacao stood frozen for a moment, her silver scales pale with confusion and the first cold touch of fear. Then she followed him into the darkness of the ship. Word spread quickly through the flagship. Eternal Flame, Commander Vexterin wanted to address the senior officers. The celebration grew quieter as warriors whispered to one another something was wrong. Their great commander, the hero who had led them to victory, had not smiled once since the battle ended. He had not raised a single cup of wine. He had not joined in a single song. By the time Vexen reached the tactical briefing room, 43 senior officers had already gathered. They stood in neat rows, their scales ranging from the deep emerald of veteran warriors to the pale silver of younger officers who had risen quickly through the ranks during the Desperate final cycles of the war. Kurasal took her place at the front of the room. She watched as her commander walked slowly to the center of the space, his heavy boots clicking against the metal floor. The room fell completely silent. Vextheron did not speak immediately. He looked at each face in the room one by one, as if memorizing them. These were his officers, his family. They had bled beside him. Many of them had nearly died beside him. They trusted him completely. That trust made what he had to say even harder. Many of you fought beside me in the final campaign, he began. His voice was calm and steady, the voice of a commander who had given thousands of orders over his long career. Many of you remember when the human transport arrived, 37 soldiers. That was all Earth sent to honor their alliance treaty. Few officers shifted uncomfortably. Memory was still fresh and still embarrassing. The I Council had been furious. Diplomatic messages had flown back and forth for days. I was there when their commanding officer stepped off that transport. Rixan continued. I was there to deliver the High Council's official protest. I was ready to tell the humans that their insult would not be forgotten. He paused and took a slow breath. The human commander was a female named Kate Morrison. She was small. Her head barely reached the middle of my chest. She had soft pink skin and brown hair and eyes the color of forest leaves. She wore simple combat armor that looked like it would break if I struck it with my fist. She had no scales, no claws, no natural weapons of any kind. Several officers made quiet sounds of contempt. They remembered the humans, fragile little creatures who needed special breathing equipment and temperature-controlled environments. Creatures who slept for a third of every day and needed to consume food and water constantly just to stay alive. I told her that 37 soldiers was an insult. Beakstheron said. I told her that we were fighting for the survival of the galaxy. I told her that the Draken swarm had consumed 4 civilizations and would consume ours too if we did not stop them. I asked her how Earth dared to send so few warriors when so much was at stake. He stopped pacing and stood very still. Do you know what she said to me? The room was silent. Every officer leaned forward slightly, waiting. She smiled, not a nervous smile or an apologetic smile, a real smile, the kind you see on a warrior who knows something you do not know. And then she said very calmly, Commander, 37 is more than enough. Just point us at the enemy. Vextheron let those words hang in the air. I thought she was insane. I thought the humans were fools who did not understand the scale of the war they had joined. I reported to the High Council that Earth's contribution was worthless and that we should expect nothing from them. He began pacing again, his hands clasped behind his back. For the first few weeks, I ignored the humans completely. I had real soldiers to command. I had battles to plan. I did not have time to worry about 37 soft-skinned aliens who thought they could make a difference. Then the siege of Talos 7 began. Mood in the room changed instantly. Every officer remembered the siege. It had been the worst battle of the war. The Dreenar had thrown everything they had at the planet, determined to break through the coalition defensive line and consume the billions of innocent civilians below. For 37 days, the coalition fleet had fought without rest. Ships were destroyed faster than they could be replaced. Warriors died by the thousands. On the 19th day of the siege, Vex Thurin said, I received a request. From Kate Morrison, she wanted to speak with me about a tactical proposal. I almost refused. I was exhausted and angry and did not want to waste time listening to whatever foolish plan the humans had invented. He stopped pacing. But something made me agree to the meeting. I still do not know what it was. Perhaps fate, perhaps a luck, perhaps something else entirely. Kate Morrison came to my command center with two of her officers, a male named Danny Russo and a female named Megan Price. They were even smaller than Morrison. Russo had dark hair and scars on his face. Price had yellow hair tied back in a tight knot and eyes that never stopped moving, never stopped watching. Morrison spread a tactical map on my table and pointed to the Draken carrier that anchored their defensive perimeter. The carrier was the key to everything. As long as it existed, the Draken could coordinate their swarm ships and maintain their defensive formation. We had already lost 14 capital ships and 8,000 warriors trying to destroy it. Morrison looked at that carrier, looked at all the death it had caused, and said 5 words that I will never forget. Vex. Thurin's voice dropped lower. She said, "We will board that ship." Several officers made sounds of disbelief. Board a Dreener carrier. The idea was madness. The ship was protected by hundreds of defensive weapons. Even if someone could get inside, there were 40,000 Draken warriors aboard. It would be suicide. I told her exactly that. Beekson said, I told her it was impossible. I told her that sending soldiers into that ship would be murder, not warfare. Do you know what she said? He looked around the room at his officer. She smiled again, that same smile, and she said, Commander, my people have a saying, impossible just means no one has done it yet. Give us a shuttle in 12 hours. If we fail, you lose nothing but 37 soldiers you never wanted anyway. If we succeed, the sea ends. I agreed. I told myself it was because I had nothing to lose. I told myself the humans were going to die anyway, so they might as well die doing something useful. Vexaranza's hands curled into fists at his sides. I was a fool. I had no idea what I had just unleashed. I had no idea what humans were capable of when they decided that something needed to die. He looked at Kurasal and she saw that strange fear in his eyes again. What happened next changed everything I believed about war, about courage, and about the soft little creatures from the planet called Earth. Senior tactician Mur was the oldest officer in the room. His scales had faded from bright green to a dull gray color over his many cycles of service. He had fought in 3 wars before this. One, he had seen things that would break younger minds. He was not easily impressed. He raised his hand slowly and Vexaran nodded for him to speak. With great respect, Commander Mur said, we all saw the humans fight during the siege. They were effective, more effective than we expected, but surely you do not believe that 37 soft-skinned aliens won the war for us. We had 12,000 ships in that battle. We had millions of warriors. The humans were a tiny drop in a vast ocean. Vexen looked at his old friend with something like sadness in his 4 eyes. Tell me, Mur, how many ships did we lose trying to break through the Drakener defensive perimeter before the humans acted? 14 capital ships, Morveth answered immediately. 8,000 warriors, good soldiers, all of them. And how did we finally break through that perimeter? Morveth did not Answer he knew. Everyone in the room knew, but saying it out loud felt wrong. Somehow Vex single quotes Tarn walked to the holographic display at the center of the room and activated it. The image of the Dreenar carrier appeared floating in the air above the projector. It was a massive ship, ugly and organic looking, covered in weapons and armored plates. Grown from living tissue, 6 humans. Beekson said quietly, "That is how many." Boarded the shuttle. Kate Morrison stayed behind to coordinate from our flagship. Danny Russo led the boarding team. Megan Price went with him along with 4 other soldiers whose names I did not learn until after they were dead. He touched a control and the recording began to play. The officers watched as a small human shuttle detached from the Corvani flagship. It was tiny compared to the warships around it, barely larger than an escape pod. It dove toward the Dracena carrier at maximum speed, weaving between defensive fire that filled the space around it. With deadly light, the shuttle was hit 17 times during its approach. Vextorin narrated, its shields failed after the 9th hit, its engines failed after the 14th. By the time it reached the carrier's defensive range, it was little more than a burning wreck falling through space. The recording showed the shuttle breaking apart. Pieces of metal flew in all directions, and from the wreckage 6 small figures emerged, wearing armored suits and carrying weapons. They jumped, Rixan said. Their shuttle was destroyed and they jumped into the vacuum of space and continued toward their target. The officers watched in silence as the 6 human figures tumbled through the void. Dreenar defensive weapons tried to track them, but they were too small and moving too fast. 2 of the figures were hit and spun away into the darkness, their suits torn open by enemy fire. 4 figures reached the carrier's hull. 4 humans, Beeksthorin said, against a ship carrying 40,000 Dano warriors. Danny Russo, Megan Price, and 2 soldiers named Victor Compass and Lisa Novik. The recording showed the 4 humans cutting through the carrier's outer hull with plasma torches. They disappeared inside and the external cameras could no longer track them. I monitored their communication channel. For the next 9 hours, Vexen continued. What I heard still gives me nightmares. He paused the recording. The humans did not try to fight 40,000 enemies. They were not stupid. They knew they could not win a direct battle. Instead, they did something I had never seen any species do before. They became hunters. Vexem began to pace again. They moved through the ship like ghosts. They set traps using the Dreer-Sohn technology. They poisoned air supplies. They destroyed critical systems and then waited in the darkness for repair crews to arrive. When the Denner sent search parties to find them, the humans let themselves be found and then led those parties into ambush. For 9 hours, 4 humans terrorized a ship of 40,000. The Denner sent hundreds of warriors after them, then thousands. The humans killed and kept moving. When they ran out of ammunition, they used knives. When their knives broke, they used pieces of metal torn from the walls. When Victor Compass was wounded so badly he could not walk, he told the others to leave him with a grenade and continued fighting alone until his death. Vexen's voice had grown rough. Lisa Novik died, sealing a door behind her teammates, trapping herself in a corridor with 200 Draconner. Her final transmission was her laughing. She was laughing as they tore her apart. The room was absolutely Silent, several younger officers had gone pale beneath their scales. Danny Russell and Megan Price reached the reactor core with 17 minutes of oxygen remaining in their suits. They were both wounded. Russell had lost 3 fingers on his left hand. Price had a piece of metal embedded in her side. They planted their explosives, set the timer, and began fighting their way back toward the outer hull. Vexen restarted the recording. The officers watched as the Drawn-air carrier suddenly glowed from within. Then it broke apart in a massive explosion that sent debris flying in all directions. The defensive perimeter collapsed instantly as the Draconos swarm ships lost their coordination. Megan Price did not survive. Vexterin said she died 2 corridors away from the whole breach they had planned to use for escape. Russell carried her body as far as he could before he had to let go. He turned off the recording. We found Danny Russell floating in the wreckage 3 hours later. He was unconscious, nearly dead from blood loss and oxygen deprivation. His suit had been punctured in 11 places. He had sealed each puncture with emergency patches made from the bodies of dead Draenor. Vexen looked around the room at his officers. When Russell woke up in our medical bay, the first thing he asked was whether the carrier was destroyed. When we told him yes, he smiled. Then he asked how many of his team had survived. When we told him he was the only one, he did not cry. He did not scream. He simply nodded and said they died. Well, that is all any of us can ask. He let those words sink in. 4 humans destroyed a carrier that our entire fleet could not touch. 4 humans broke a siege that had lasted 19 days and killed 8,000 of our warriors. 4 humans did the impossible because no one had told them it could not be done. Senior tactician Morvis spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. How could 4 fragile creatures accomplish what our greatest warriors could not? Vexerin turned to face his old friend. Because humans do not fight the way we do. They do not fight the way any species in this galaxy fights. We have rules. We have honor codes. We fight until the battle is decided, and then we accept the outcome. The dinner, mindless swarm creatures who overwhelmed through numbers. Every species has a pattern, a way of making war that can be predicted and countered. His voice dropped. Humans have no pattern. They lie, they cheat, they adapt, they refuse to accept defeat. Even when defeat is certain, they will drag themselves through fire with broken bones to complete their mission. They will sacrifice themselves not for honor but for spite. And the worst part, the part that truly terrifies me is this. He met Morvith Sices. They enjoy it. The briefing room had grown cold. No one spoke. The younger officers stared at the floor at their hands, trying to process what they had just heard. The older officers exchanged glances filled with unease. Even Morvith, who had seen so much in his long life, looked troubled. Finally, a young officer named Talvik spoke up. He was one of the newest members of the senior staff, promoted quickly during the desperate final cycles of the war. His scales were bright blue, marking him as a member of a noble family. Surely you exaggerate, Commander, he said. His voice carried the confidence of youth and privilege. The humans are remarkable. Yes, the carrier assault was impressive, but they are still soft creatures. They require constant temperature regulation. They sleep for a third of their existence. Their bones break easily. They have no natural weapons, no armor, no venom. How can such fragile beings truly be so dangerous? Vaxaran studied the young officer for a long moment. There was no anger in his gaze, only a deep and weary patience. Let me tell you what I witnessed in the tunnels of Kryn 4, he said. Perhaps that will answer your question. He began to pace slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Assault on Kryn 4 happened in the 5th cycle of the war. The Dreer had established a breeding nest deep beneath the planet's surface. If we did not destroy it, they would produce enough new drones to overwhelm our defensive lines within 3 months. I led the ground assault personally. Several officers nodded. They remembered Kryn 4. It had been one of the bloodiest battles of the war. We sent 2,000 warriors into those tunnels. We expected heavy resistance. We did not expect the Draconar to collapse the main entrance behind us. Vexaran's jaw tightened at the memory. 60 of us survived the initial collapse. 60 warriors trapped in a maze of tunnels, with Dreno drones closing in from 3 directions. Our communication equipment was destroyed. Our heavy weapons were buried under tons of rock. We had no way to call for help and no way to fight our way out. He stopped pacing and faced his officers. We accepted our deaths. That is what Carven warriors do when defeat is certain. We began the ritual chants. We prepared our souls for the journey to the afterworld. We waited for the end. There was 3 humans with us. They had been assigned to our unit as observers. A gesture of cooperation between our peoples. A medic named Sam Delgado, combat engineer named Hannah Torres, and their squad leader, a scarred male named Chris Hardley. Vextarain's expression changed. Something almost like wonder entered his eyes. Hartley watched us prepare to die. He listened to our chants and then he laughed. Several officers made sounds of offense. To laugh at death rituals was a grave insult in Corvani culture. It was not a mocking laugh, Beeksthuren said quickly. It was the laugh of someone who genuinely found our behavior confusing. He looked at me with those strange human eyes and said, "Commander, what are you doing?" "We are not dead yet." I told him that our situation was hopeless. We were trapped, outnumbered, and outgunned. Death was certain. He shook his head and said words I will never forget. He said, "Nobody is dying today except the bugs. Sam, patch up whoever is bleeding. Hannah, I need you to turn those mining charges into directional explosives. Everyone else follow me. We are going to make them regret ever crawling down here." Vexaran resumed his pacing. 66 hours, those 3 humans led us through those tunnels. They did not think like warriors. They did not fight like warriors. They thought like predators, like hunters. Artley knew things about combat that no training could teach. He could look at a tunnel and see not just what it was, but what it could become. A narrow passage became a choke point where 3 warriors could hold off 100 drones. Collapsed section became a trap that buried 50 enemies alive. A chemical storage room became a weapon that poisoned an entire branch of the tunnel network. When Hartley ran out of ammunition for his weapon, he did not despair. He picked up a broken support beam and kept fighting. I watched him kill 11 Dreer drones with that piece of metal. His arms must have been burning with exhaustion, but he never slowed down. Rextheron's voice grew softer. Hannah Torres was wounded early in our escape. A drone's claw tore open her side. Do you know what she did? She took her plasma cutting tool and cauterized. Her own wound, I could smell her flesh. Burning, she did not scream, she did not cry, she finished sealing the wound and went back to building traps. Sam Delgado saved 12 Sivani lives that day. He moved through the chaos like a ghost, appearing wherever he was needed most. He treated wounds that our own meds had given up on. He kept warriors alive through sheer stubbornness, refusing to let them die because he had decided they would not. We lost 9 warriors in those tunnels. And out of 60, we should have lost all of us. Every tactical calculation said we should have died down there, but the humans did not care about tactical calculations. They only cared about survival. Vexen stopped and turned to face Talvex directly. When the rescue team finally broke through to us, they found Hartley carrying Sam on his back. Sam had lost consciousness from blood loss. Any other soldier would have left him behind to increase their own chances of survival. But Hartley refused. He carried his wounded friend for 2 hours through hostile tunnels while still firing his sidearm at pursuing Dreener, and when I thanked him, do you know what he said? He said, "Don't mention it, Commander. Tuesdays are always rough." Vexterin paused. It was not Tuesday. I checked the Earth calendar later. It was something called Saturday. Humans sometimes say things that make no logical sense, and they find this amusing. I still do not understand why. A few nervous laughs echoed through the room. The tension had broken slightly, but the unease remained. I have more stories, Beekster continued. I could tell you about the human sniper named Ray Cortez who held a mountain pass for 18 hours with a broken leg and no food. I could tell you about the pilot named Natalie Webb who flew her damaged fighter directly into a Dreener troop transport because her weapons had failed, and she refused to let the enemy reach the civilian colony below. I could tell you about the engineer named Derek Akono, who repaired a reactor breach with his bare hands, knowing the radiation would kill him because the ship carried 3,000 refugees who would die if the power failed. He looked around the room. Every human I met during this war had a story like that, every single one. Not because they were special among their kind, but because that is simply what humans do. They refuse to accept the limits that the universe places on them. They look at impossible situations and find ways to win anyway, and when they cannot win, they make sure the enemy pays such a terrible price that victory feels like defeat. Talvex had gone very quiet. His blue scales had palled to a sickly gray color. You asked how fragile creatures can be dangerous. Vextorin said, that is your answer. Humans are dangerous because they do not know they are supposed to lose, and by the time you teach them that lesson, you have already lost everything. Commander Vextorin walked slowly to the viewport at the side of the briefing room. Beyond the thick glass, the wreckage of the Dracona Hive fleet still drifted in the void. Broken ships tumbled slowly through space, their organic holes torn open and lifeless. It was a graveyard that stretched for thousands of kilometers in every direction. The officers waited in silence. They had listened to their commander stories. They inhered everything they believed about strength and weakness, about victory and defeat. Now they waited to learn why he had gathered them here. Vexorin stared at the wreckage for a long time before he spoke. I did not gather you here to praise the humans, he said finally, his Voice was heavy with exhaustion and something deeper. I gathered you here to warn you. He turned to face his officers. One last time. In 37 humans I witnessed more creativity, more adaptability, and more sheer terrifying determination than in all the armies of the Kavani Empire. 37 soldiers, that is all Earth sent, and those 37 soldiers changed the course of the war. He began walking slowly along the edge of the room, passing his officers one by one. Earth has billions of humans, billions. They have been fighting each other for their entire history. War is not something new to them. It is something they have perfected over thousands of cycles. They have developed weapons and tactics that we cannot imagine. They've learned to turn every disadvantage into an advantage, every weakness into a trap, and they are young. Their civilization is barely a blink compared to ours. They discovered faster than light travel within living memory. They have not yet learned the caution that comes with age. They have not yet been broken by the weight of history. They still believe that any problem can be solved through sufficient effort and stubbornness. Max, Darren stopped in front of Murreth. The Drake in a swarm consumed 4 civilizations before we stopped them. 4 ancient peoples erased from existence, billions of lives lost. Cultures that had existed for millions of cycles gone forever. The swarm nearly consumed us as well. For 18 cycles we fought them with everything we had, and we were still losing. He placed his hand on his old friend's shoulder. Then the humans truly committed to the war. Not 37 soldiers, 37 specialists sent to evaluate our tactics and find weaknesses in the enemy. Once they understood the Draina, they sent recommendations back to Earth. And Earth sent more soldiers, not many more, just a few hundred, but those few hundred humans changed everything. Vex Thurin continued his walk around the room. In the final 3 months of the war, after the humans took a more active role, the Draken lost 90% of their remaining forces, 90%. Breeding nests that we had been unable to locate for cycles were suddenly destroyed. Supply lines that seemed impossible to cut were suddenly severed. Ships that had fought our fleet to a standstill were suddenly exploding from within. The humans did things we did not ask them to do. They did things we did not even know were possible. They infiltrated enemy positions that our best scouts could not reach. They turned Dreer technology against its creators. They found weaknesses in the swarm's communication network and exploited them to create chaos and confusion. He stopped in the center of the room. I am called a war hero because I commanded the fleet that won the final battle. I will receive medals and honors. Songs will be written about my name, but the truth, the harsh truth that I need all of you to understand is that we did not win this war. His 4 eyes swept across the room. The humans let us believe we helped. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Several officers looked as if they wanted to protest, but no one spoke. The evidence of their commander stories was too strong to deny. Lieutenant Kurasal finally found her voice. What would you have us do? Commander, fear them, fight them. Vexerin let out a laugh that held no joy. Fear them, absolutely every thinking being in this galaxy should fear what humans are capable of. I have seen what they can do when they decide something needs to die. I have watched them accomplish the impossible simply because no one told them they could not. I have heard them laugh in situations that would break the minds of our strongest warriors. He shook his head. Slowly, but fight them. No, Lieutenant. That would be suicide. The Dina had billions of drones and technology that surpassed our own. They had conquered 4 civilizations. They nearly conquered us, and the humans broke them in 3 months. If we ever went to war with Earth, we would not last 3 months, we would not last 3 weeks. Humans would find every weakness in our defenses, every flaw in our tactics, every vulnerability in our culture, and they would exploit all of them without mercy. He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. My advice to all of you is simple: be their friends. Be useful to them, make them laugh. They love to laugh, though their humor confuses me. Share your food with them, and they will share theirs. Show interest in their strange customs and their endless stories. Learn their languages and their history. Become valuable to them, because the only thing more dangerous than a human who hates you is a human who has forgotten you exist. He reached for the door control, then paused. The High Council believes they can manage the humans. They believe that trade agreements and diplomatic protocols will keep Earth contained to their little corner of the galaxy. They are fools. Humans do not stay contained. They spread, they adapt, they find the cracks in every barrier and push through. In 1,000 cycles, we Corvani may still have our empire. We may still have our worlds and our culture and our way of life, but we will only have these things because the humans allow us to have them. That is the truth. That is the harsh reality that our leaders do not want to accept. He looked at his officers one final time. I have served the Corvani Empire. For my entire life, I have fought in wars and led armies and watched good soldiers die. I have earned every medal they have given me, but today I am tired. Today I want to rest. And when the High Council asks me to speak about the war, I will tell them exactly what I have told you. I do not know if they will listen. I do not know if it will matter, but at least you will know the truth. At least you will understand what our small, soft, terrifying allies from Earth really are. Commander Vexarin pressed the door control and stepped out into the corridor. He did not take his medals with him. He did not look back. He simply walked away, leaving behind the sounds of celebration that still echoed through the ship and the 43 Corvani officers who sat in stunned silence. Curacao remained in her seat for a long time after her commander left. She thought about the stories he had told. She thought about the humans she had seen during the war, those strange little creatures who smiled too much and laughed at things that were not funny and refused to accept defeat. She thought about what the future might hold. And for the first time in her life, Lieutenant Curacao understood that strength was not measured in scales or claws or weapons. Strength was measured in the willingness to keep fighting when all hope was lost. Strength was measured in the refusal to accept the limits that the universe placed on Udon. By that measure, the humans were the strongest species in the galaxy. And that truth, she realized, should terrify everyone.